Yeah, but I didn't understand. I mean, I've seen it. I saw that a couple of weeks ago when it was originally.
No, I don't have any idea.
Well, so when we were building our house, we did tell about. And they had just moved ocean crust pools and all.
Yeah, but I didn't understand. I mean, I've seen.
Vacant because they had to. So we had to do that. The worst thing, well, put your name on there. And he was such a shyster. It's like I didn't trust him, so we built our own. Well.
No bond.
Yeah.
Is that one of those surfaces?
Yeah, I can't get the thing to,
You're twisted.
I can't get it undone. I've tried for 2 days now.
What?
And I have to.
You know what your setting is on lock or something?
Yeah, I bet it's locked.
You know, like on your iPhone. That's the thing.
No, I don't know about that.
Tried all the things I know.
There's a tablet mode,
This is the last one.
Did it do that?
location, battery saver, display. It could be a lot.
That's
On
different.
the other
from our
hand, a
Windows
lot got done.
service.
Richard.
Additional display settings.
Yep.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
Rotation lock is on.
That's it. There you go. We found it, but we can't move it.
See, and I reboot. And
There you go.
I- Upside down.
5 seconds.
We found it.
I'll get Chris. Okay, because it. Thank you.
That's frustrating.
I don't-
Yeah, there is a flip. There is a rotation lock.
Good evening, everyone.
It's been acting out for a week or more.
Are we good back there, Chris? Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the December 13th, 2022 Belton City Council meeting. Amazingly enough, this is the last one of 2022. I can't believe that it's already flown by so quickly. Tonight, the Pledge of Allegiance to the U.S. flag will be led by Councilmember John R. Holmes Sr. The Pledge of Allegiance to the Texas flag will be led Director of Public Works Matt Bates, and the prayer will be given by Councilmember Craig Pearson.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Texas flag. The Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Please pray with me. Father God, we come to you in Jesus' holy, precious name. We thank you that we're in and of a place where we can gather without fear, that we can come to conduct your business in a manner that will bring you honor and glory. And Lord, we pray, indeed we claim that your Spirit will lead us to do that which will take best care of our citizens and of this wonderful city where you've placed us. May it be so in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Craig. Call this meeting to order. Before we get to public comments, just want to thank city staff, Michelle and Amy and everyone who had a hand in putting the Christmas party together this last week. Y'all did a fantastic job, and if you weren't there, you missed a great time. I think we had over 200 employees and families together. So appreciate everybody for their hard work on that. It was a great time. At this time, we'll open it up for public comments. Citizens who desire to address the council on any matter may register to do so prior to this meeting and speak during this item. The forms are located on the table outside the south entry. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Please understand that while the council appreciates sharing your comments, state law prohibits them from, one, engaging in discussion other than providing a statement of specific factual information or reciting existing city policy, and taking action other than directing staff to place the matter on a future agenda. We have 2 persons signed up. First of all, we have Mr. Adam Ward for the Bell County
Adam Ward, business address 11 Water Street here in Belton, home address 11002 Bigham Road, Troy. I'm here tonight, representing Bell County and requesting all citizens in Belton and Bell County to challenge the new FCC map that's just been recently released, just towards the end of November. Apologies for not making the regular agenda. This is something that came up pretty quick. We want to get it in front of as many folks as we could as quickly as possible because it has a due date of January 13th for this challenge process. The federal government plans to invest billions of dollars bringing high-speed internet to American homes. Bell County officials want to do everything possible to ensure Bell County's families benefit from this investment. In the coming weeks, we are urging citizens and residents to review a map created by the FCC. And if they find inconsistencies, challenge these maps again before January 13th. The amount of money that's being dedicated to expanding rural access to broadband represents a once in a generation investment that I compare sort of to the Eisenhower expansion of the interstate system back in the day when similar capabilities as far as fiber and infrastructure build out. Please note that the FCC map that has been released currently shows that every resident in Bell County has access to broadband internet. I know that probably most of you know folks that do not have access. So part of this challenge, the FCC's released that. Of course, they're getting this information from internet service providers who are saying, yeah, we're covering the area. So this process is requesting that residents log in. I actually have some information that if it's okay, I'll leave out on the podium. But in essence, you log into the FCC site, go to your address, put your address in sort of like Google Maps. It'll pull up and show the internet service providers that they show can service your home. We just request you go in there, validate the data. You can do speed tests and validate, does the speed test you're actually getting represent what you're being told or what you're purchasing, and submit that as a challenge. The address to do that, I'll go ahead and say that is, it's the address of the FCC site is broadbandmap.fcc.gov. Again, broadbandmap.fcc.gov. The site will actually be open for an extended period of time, but from the FCC federal funding, they are going to pull that information on January 13th, which is that critical date. And there's quite a few grants out in the marketplace from the federal part of the IIJA. I think Texas is allocated to get $3 to $5 billion. I don't think it's fully defined specifically for broadband. There's other pots of money. Unfortunately, they're going to use these maps to identify that. So it's important that the citizens challenge that.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate you bringing it to us in a timely fashion. I know you're under a time constraint, so
Thank you.
thank you very much. Next person, Mr. Troy Finley. And I want to remind you, please, that Mr. Pearson here will give you a heads up at 15 seconds. And please address your comments to the council as a whole rather than to individuals, persons. Thanks, sir.
Good afternoon. What a good crowd. My name is Troy Finley. I own the Cricket Garage located at 702 South Pearl Street here in Belton, Texas. I brought in an email that I received from the city of Belton. As y'all can see, council, that is dated August 11th, 2021. So I've been doing this for a solid minute now. So if you look at page number 2 and you go down to where the building permit for the garage apartment was issued after most of the requirements were met. After most of the requirements, the project was able to proceed while the city waited on a minor revision. It wasn't able to proceed, it was allowed to proceed. The city of Belton has assisted a crooked contractor throughout this entire process, because if you go on down there and you go down and you see on that same page, actually, it's the second page, on 4/20/20, on 4/2/2020, the city partially passed a framing, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing inspection for the garage apartment. So once again, it didn't meet all the requirements, most of them. While this guy comes down here and builds a structure that not only doesn't meet code, it falls under the guidelines of a dangerous building. How can y'all let this happen? I have brought this to the attention. Read that again. The building permit for the garage apartment was issued after most of the requirements were met. Is that who we want running this city after most of the requirements? What other proprietary responsibilities does the city of Belton, Texas only require most of the requirements? Chief?
Mr. Finley, please address the council like I asked you.
Okay. I'm asking y'all to ask the chief. Does he only require most of the requirements? Did y'all only require most of the requirements when you hired a city manager? Not all of the requirements? Let me ask you this. You go to the airport and you've got two planes you can pick from. One of those planes they announce and say, all aboard, this plane meets all the requirements to taxi and take off. This one says,
15 seconds, sir.
all aboard, this one meets most of the requirements to taxi and take off. Which plane you gonna pick? And I ask you, when you go into your executive session, you pray about it. Because God is stirring, change is coming to Belton, Texas.
Time's up, Mr. Finley. Thank you,
This
sir.
has gone on long enough.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Item 3 on the agenda is to receive child safety fee funds presented by Bell County, and Commissioner Russell Snyder is here. It's always great to see you, especially when you're carrying.
I don't know about that.
Merry Christmas, Mayor and Council. Glad to be here tonight. I come bearing gifts. Annually, we present checks from Child Safety Check. It's fees collected from the tax collector assessors. It's $1.50 per registration. I think this year we're up 0.91% from 21. I think resulting in a little over 309,000 vehicles that were registered. As you know, Transportation Code Chapter 502 or 0.403, it basically says that this check be used for crossing guards. And if a school doesn't have the crossing guards, it's safety programs and hand safety and health and nutrition of the children. So I think you've all followed those requirements this year. And it's a pleasure to announce this year's Belton's collection was $25,954.29. So the letter is made out to Sam Listy from Shea Ludicky, but not necessarily the check. So the check is made out to the city of Temple. So with that in mind, I'd like to present this check, I guess, to I have a wonderful evening. I've got to make a Christmas.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. We appreciate
Thank you,
it.
sir.
And as always, that money will be given to BISD to provide crossing guards. So it doesn't really stay around here very long anyway, so, but we do appreciate it. Items 4 through 9 are under the consent agenda and considered to be routine. They may be enacted by one motion. If any council member wishes to pull that item, we can do so. Item 4, to consider the minutes of the November 22nd, 2022. There's too many twos in there. Council meeting. Item 5, to consider an appointment of an alternate to serve on the Building and Standards Commission. And I have appointed Mr. Eric Hagelberg to do that. Item 6, to consider authorizing the purchase of a 3/4 ton truck for the Public Works Street Department through the Buy Board Purchasing Cooperative as provided for in the Capital Equipment Replacement Fund. Item 7 is to consider authorizing a license agreement with the Belton Independent School District to allow for the use of public right-of-way for student, staff, and visitor safety in the 200 through 400 blocks of North Blair Street, adjacent to the Belton UTEC High School at Wasco and the Belton Early Childhood Center, BECS. Item number 8, to consider a resolution adopting the financial policies for the city of Belton. Item 9, consider a resolution authorizing the award of a contract to REM Quality Construction for the construction of 2 houses as part of the home program grant awarded by the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. Those are the items on the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to pull an item, or do I hear a motion?
I'll do two things. One, I'd like to remove item 7 for consideration, and at the same time,
move that we approve items 4 through 9, Sam's 7 as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve all items except item 7. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, those items are passed unanimously. Item 7, Chief Ellis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Item 7 is the closing of portions of Blair Street in the 2 to 400 blocks during school days. This has been requested by Belton Independent School District. Mike Morgan is actually with us in the audience as well, and happy to answer questions. With the increased use of New Tech High School and the buildings across the street, kids are moving daily across the street on school days, and this is just a good safety measure to put in place. The street will still be a public street and will be open during non-school hours for vehicle traffic as normal. It would just be closed as indicated on the map during school days and school hours.
Okay, yeah, so thanks for that. No opposition to it. I just, when we do this, I don't know how long it would be. I don't know that there's a specific term to this. Is to make sure that we ensure that the street right of way and the street structure is maintained as a thoroughfare. In the case it has to revert back to the city. I'd hate for it to, over time, we forget what it happens and all of a sudden it gets all buildings built on, you know what I'm saying, but
Sure.
but that's mainly kind of that discussion. And how do we, do we maintain it? Do they maintain it?
We still maintain it. It is just a use agreement. It's not actually dedicating any right of way to them or their permanent use of right of way. They're just being allowed to close it similar that we've done for events. This is just a longer term situation because the event would be school days, but it would still maintain as a public right of way, public street owned by the city of Belton.
When that's closed, is that just a gate and then open on the weekends?
It's actually type 3 barricades as on the screen there at the bottom. So they'd be actually moved out there daily by school personnel and brought in every evening. The gates that are currently there on about the 400 block that have been there for decades will actually be taken away. Those are a really bad design. Sometimes they get the wind blows them back in the street. They're very problematic. So those will actually be removed.
And that goes up to 5th Street. Is that, okay, so it stops at 5th. Okay,
Yes.
that was the second question, is how far, because we've got Dollar and the chicken and the donut place.
Yes, sir. And so that's why it's showed on there to be barricaded an angle to allow traffic flow through that area. And then the opening between number 2 and 3 on those barricades, that's to allow the traffic flow and traffic pattern for Bex. The way the parents come in, it's the safest way to move them through there. And then the school district will also move barricades to allow the buses in and out because they load in the area between 3 and 4.
I
Thank
may
you.
have zoned, but did we get an answer to your the term length question?
Is there, is just,
There's no term link, but it's also not it's not a permanent right of way.
okay.
If you guys want to put a term on it, that we can certainly make that amendment.
I
Because
think
no, we
it'd
had
be
that come
good
with
for
Miller's.
to have some level that can be renewed annually, or I don't know, something, I don't know what, I think it's a great thing to do. I just a couple of loose ends there.
I think it'd be consistent with what we did with Miller's and the drive-through. Originally, there wasn't a term on it, but it was kind of an indefinite, could be repealed anytime, but
I do believe we do have a repeal in there. It's a 30-day out
Okay.
clause. So we do have a repeal in there
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
at any time. But if we need to do it for street work or any other purpose, we still have the authority to take the street back. And also we've got the emergency clause in there too, that it could be open for emergency access. That's another reason we went the type 3 barricades that could be easily moved.
Thanks.
Sounds great. Thank you for coming, Mr. Morgan. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having spent some time in that neighborhood, I agree with you. I think it's a good idea. Anybody, any other questions or comments by council?
I move we approve agenda item number 7.
Second.
I have a motion and multiple seconds for agenda item number 7. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it is approved. Item number 10, Consider the following actions related to the proposed River Farms Municipal Utility District MUD located east of IH-35 between Shanklin and the Lampasas River, north of Elmer King Road and east of Toll Bridge Road, and containing approximately 480 acres.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Happy to present this item to you tonight. Y'all are very familiar with the River Farm MUD that has come before you in the past and was approved about a year ago now. The reason the item is coming back to you tonight is in order to address the new owner of the property and their development phasing is the primary reason for the change and what we're presenting to you tonight. As you all know, the MUD was approved by the Belton City Council January 26, 2021, and then by the Texas Legislature in mid-2021 as an out-of-city MUD. Y'all know where the property is located on the east side of I-35 between Shanklin and the Lampasas River on the east side of Toll Bridge Road. As you mentioned, contains about 480 acres with the approval for 1,775 lots. The proposal today is to take 3 actions related to the MUD agreement and a proposed amendment that is before the council for consideration. This is the first amendment of the development agreement. We also will address the revised annexation consent agreement on what we're calling tract 1 and then also tract 2. So 3 different action items, A, B, and C, are what under consideration today. The property was acquired by the Hunt Company just about a year ago now. And we've been working with them during this time period on development planning, preliminary platting, some grading plans, and we've worked closely on these development plans. The city's water line is complete down Toll Bridge Road. The sewer lift station is nearly complete. Into this month, we should have that completely finished with just a couple of items outstanding, punch list items. The developer's change in phasing, as I mentioned, is the primary reason that we're coming before you today at their request. Originally, the developer, Mr. Utley, was planning to develop the property from the north to the south. This developer is proposing to develop from the south to the north, going all the way down to the river to initiate the development. And that's the reason for the request. Some of the key issues in this matter relate to the assurance that both parties ensure the developer obligations for the construction and phasing of Toll Bridge Road and the disannexation of the city limit portion of the property occur in a timely manner. And we believe that the package of items before you today achieve this objective. I'll talk about these 3 different components that are addressed in your staff report: Toll Bridge Road, disannexation, and the timeline for actions. We have Brent Murphy here from Kimley Horn, who will make some staff comment or make some comments. We have some other River Farms team members here and the developers available as well, Mr. Smith. Finally, our legal counsel is here as well, Trey Larry and Francis Blake. And then John Messer, of course. We've all been intimately involved with this process as we have moved to try to accommodate the request and ensure that the city's issues are also satisfied as we go through this process. And so we'll answer your questions anytime during the process. And I only have about 30 more slides now, not quite that many. It's a complicated development process of the MUD. And so there were a lot of things that we needed to look at to ensure that things are taken care of. Just a quick reminder of the location and the map. The area in green is the River Farms property, as you can see. The southernmost portion of Toll Bridge Road is what we're calling phase 1, or what the original development agreement called phase 1 for Toll Bridge Road improvements. The northern portion, north of the subdivision, is phase 2. So those are the 2 aspects of the street that are the primary focus of our attention. If you see the River Farms boundary in green, the area along the river, you can see the city limit portion, the portion that is within the MUD and the portion that is outside the MUD. And so those are also components that I'll be speaking about tonight. And then, of course, look to the far east of the River Farms property, and you can see the portion of the city east of Elm Grove Road that is also inside the city limits. So one of the key issues was preserving connectivity of the city limit portion of the property to that area on the east side of Elm Grove Road once the River Farm property is de-annexed. So quickly again on Toll Bridge Road obligations by the developer. They are required to provide 40 feet of right of way to the center line, design the road, and then construct it in 2 phases. The objective with the Toll Bridge Road component is to ensure adequate funds are available to build both phases when triggered. And these are the triggers and the items, the phases basically. Phase 1 is to be a 3-lane section with a 10-foot trail. That's to be built with the first phase of the subdivision submission by the developer. Phase 2 is that area north of the River Farm property, 2-lane road to be built with the plat that includes the 501st lot. And then we, as the city, can supplement that by adding the 3rd lane if we choose, and also the trail. We're responsible for right-of-way acquisition outside the River Farm property, going north up to Shanklin.
Sam, how far is that?
I have some distances in the cost estimate.
Okay.
I'll show that in just one second to you.
Go ahead.
Okay. The applicant has proposed an owner's completion bond to guarantee the funds are available to build the road with these assurances. And so we've had a lot of discussion about these items and worked very closely with the applicant to achieve these components, including an updated and current OPCC of street phases. We have 2 phases of the street essentially. And so we have good cost estimates for those, and they've been verified by the city's consulting engineer, KPA. The cost estimate is 150% of the current costs. Again, recognizing inflation is running pretty rampant right now. There's also a commitment to annual updates of the street costs to ensure that those numbers stay current. And again, kind of just a summary comment, this approach, the owner's completion bond, appears to be reasonable as a vehicle to accomplish the objective of ensuring that these funds are available. So the second topic, disannexation or de-annexation, terms used kind of interchangeably. The current development agreement does provide for the de-annexation of the property. So we're not talking about anything unique here. This is just a way to accomplish it. The developer is proposing to schedule the disannexation in 2 parts, with the owner's completion bond being the guarantee for the funds to be available when needed for road construction. A bond for both Toll Bridge Road Phase 1 and Toll Bridge Road Phase 2 will be presented within 30 days of the approval of the First Amendment, which is scheduled for today. So we have a good number for those bonds, and that will be coming to us very soon after the council's approval of this item to trigger the Phase 1 disannexation process, and that'll set that into motion. Disannexation of Phase 2 would occur when the plat phase containing the 501st lot begins. Again, a process that breaks this down into 2 parts, but something that seems reasonable to us. We will maintain a 30-foot strip of city limits retained along the Lampasas River on the River Farm side of the property, maintaining continuity out to Toll Bridge Road and to the east to the Elm Grove Road property that I mentioned before. Then that will be combined with the portion of the property that's inside the city limits, which ranges from 300 to 600 feet. So you've got the 30-foot strip and then the 300 to 600 feet. Originally, that strip is 1,000 feet. That's what we annexed originally, maintaining those strip annexations. This 2-step disannexation process appears to be an improvement of the current development agreement condition because we have the bond to guarantee the situation, and it's broken down into the 2 parts. So timeline for actions, this is the 3rd component. Your staff report includes numerous items that are necessary to carry out this amendment in the development agreement, 17 items total. But what we're talking about today are these 3 items, items 1, 2, and 3. The council approval of the First Amendment of the development agreement, and then action to address the schedule of the 2 disannexation ordinances, disannexation ordinance regarding tract 1 and regarding tract 2 as well. And then the other multiple items that will occur over time as the developer completes the process, goes through their development phasing and all, leading us ultimately to city acceptance of the final phase of Toll Bridge Road and completion and release of the bond that had been provided. So all in all, a good process, something that I think will achieve everything that we anticipated in the original development agreement and give us really more assurances to do that. All other elements within the MUD remain unchanged, maximum 1,775 dwelling units, a cost share in the water and sewer improvements totaling $2.3 million. All fees will be at 125% of the city rate. And then there is an opportunity for annexation into the city in 30 years, or when 90% of the lots are platted, bonds reimbursed, whichever occurs first. The applicant has agreed to add a provision in Article 3, Section 3.2, indicating that commercial buildings and school buildings will comply with the International Building Code for this ETJ property. So we appreciate that, that addition as well. Here's the answer to your question, Mayor, about the length of those two segments. The developer's cost estimate for Toll Bridge Road at 150% of the current cost. Phase 1 is just under $3 million, 2.9469. That's the 3-lane section, 10-foot trail, 2,400 feet in length. The phase 2 cost, it's a little bit longer segment, as you can see, $3.2 million, 2-lane, no trail, 3,700 feet in length. Again, the developer is not obligated to do the 3rd lane or the trail in that section. That's at our option as we secure right of way. And developer is well underway on the design of the road. We've seen the preliminaries and the impacted properties. So we'll have a decision to make as far as right-of-way acquisition, whether we want to go with the 3rd lane and the trail, or just go with the segment as required by the developer. So substantial commitment by the developer to meet the obligations for Toll Bridge Road, and we believe we're in very, very good shape as a result of these numbers. The numbers have been looked at extremely hard by certainly by the developer's engineer, by city staff, and our engineer KPA as well. So as a result of all that, the conclusion of my comments right now are that we will be recommending approval of the first amendment of the development agreement, and then the 2 consent resolutions regarding annexation for Tract 1 and Tract 2. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have if you have any right now. Otherwise, I'll turn it to Brent. Brent Murphy from Kimberly Horn has some comments from the developer, and then we'll have Trey Larry come up and address some of the legal aspects of the issue. Brent?
Thank you, Sam. My name is Brent Murphy. I'm with Kimberly Horn, 400 Oklahoma Street in Salina, Texas. I appreciate the city staff's time to help us work through this. Is a pretty lengthy amendment. I will say, as Sam had mentioned, that it's more expensive to start the phasing on the south side because there's more infrastructure and less density. So it is more expensive to start that in that location than on the north side. So again, I'm here, happy to answer any questions you may have. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, that was one of my questions is the expense, because I think sewer is going to have to go longer, right? So you won't be able to build it as it goes. So you're going to have a sunk cost there.
There'll be a little bit more sewer extension to get to lift station. That's a little bit more cost. I think the bigger cost is because of that, the topography falls off in that area. So there's more grading, there's more tree removals to be done. And so, and another part too, there's less density. So, most developers want to start on the north side where there's greater density and less expense, to get the development started.
So it gets in the business, but you don't have to answer. But I'm guessing that
Sure.
that fits a gap in the current available houses, right? By going in
It
there.
does. It really what it does, and it's a testament to what Hunt's trying to do here. It starts it off with the higher quality of development, right? So when you come in and you see a road that's divided along a hillside, right? So the prettiest place to capture the entry and the feel of this community is right here. So I think as Hunt's done in the past, and this is a really neat place, when people pull in, they're going to feel this is going to feel different, right? And I'd be proud of it. So you just get a different feel. We spent probably 2 months just walking where we wanted to put those 2 major roadways that come into the project. So I think the staff will be pretty proud of what that looks like.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Trey Larry with Allen Boone Humphreys Robinson. I've served as your outside legal counsel, working with Sam and John and city staff and developers. And that was a better explanation of a legal agreement than I could give or would give. I will just say this is an improvement. You had a good agreement before, and the goals have always been to make sure Toll Bridge Road gets built and to make sure that you have leverage in the whole process to make sure that that does happen. And this just makes it better. The two-phase approach, both for the disannexation and for the funding or the construction of the road, but then the completion bond up front, I think is something, an element not at all in the current agreement, and a much improved in this. I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions from council?
I'll say it's been a pleasure to work with Sam and John and your staff. They are some of the most professional of any city I work with, and they do a very good job for you.
Thank you, Mr. Larry. We agree with that statement, but it's nice to hear it from an outside source.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Trey.
Sad that some of our public comments aren't here to hear yet.
Rick, did you want to say anything while you have an opportunity? Rick. Please give your name and address and all.
My name is Rick Neff, and I live in Bastrop, 136 Territory Drive, and I'm basically a developer for this property. I'm Senior Vice President of Construction and Development for Hunt Communities. And exactly as has been said, we presented this whole idea with the idea that we wanted to start on the south side because of the river, because of the entry, because we want this to be something different and something special. That's what we thought of when we bought the property. And then we looked at the details of the development agreement, and yeah, it wasn't contemplated at that time that they would start at the south end. So how can we make this work for the city to maintain their goals and have the assurances that they have in the original development agreement? And it's taken a while to work through the details. It really has. And I'm very, I appreciate the patience of everybody on the staff, because they were very careful about guarding the city's rights and concerns, but at the same time they were open to, okay, let's see what we can, and what we ended up with, I think is a win-win. So that's all I really have, unless you have questions.
Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I just comment, anytime a developer can come in and say that they appreciate working with the city, it's a win-win. We like that. That's really good.
You're accepting, right? Yeah, you're accepting.
We appreciate that. We're gonna frame that one.
That's two in a row. Put that down on the calendar, Amy.
John.
Thank you very
John
much.
Messer. John's been very intimately involved with all this and has been right by my side as we've, worked on this process, trying to ensure the city's interests are maintained. So certainly John may have a comment or two.
I want to say, we've got a lot of meetings. I hope the next meeting will be the grand opening along the route. Got enough other meetings, but they've been very good to work with. I think what you're gonna see is a better product than we envisioned originally.
Wow.
All we ever wanted was security, and we had the security of not the annexing, giving that up, but we added to it with the lines, and hopefully the road will be built sooner than it would have under the other scenario, which is obviously in the best interest of this.
Thank you for your part in those long meetings, because I know y'all have spent a great deal of time, and I know Matt's been involved and others as well in the planning department. So we appreciate it.
And we apologize ahead of time for I-35 as you try to make it up from Bastrop to here and back again. You take your life in your own hands.
That's right. That's one of the most beautiful pieces of property in Central Texas, and I'm glad to hear your concerns and your desire to make it a real showplace. I think it's, I wish we were all in the city limits personally, but that's, I understand the situation of the development. We appreciate you doing a top-notch project. Any other questions or comments from council? Sam, I assume we need to look at these individually and pass them all.
Up to John, 3 items, A, B, and C. We recommend approval of all 3 items, whether that could be one motion or 3.
I would consider a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the following actions as presented. Item A, to approve the First Amendment of the Development Agreement. Item B, to approve the annexation consent resolution. And item C, approve the annexation consent result on the second track.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve those 3 items under item number 10. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I hear none. The motion passes unanimously. Again,
Exciting. Thank you.
thank you all for coming. Thank you, Mr. Larry, for looking out for our interests as well. And we appreciate your comments about our staff. Item number 11 is to hold a work session to discuss short-term rentals.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for coming. All right, come back and see us sometime. All right, Bob.
Mayor Council, thank you very much. Our objective this evening is to discuss the draft ordinance for the short-term rentals. And there's our objective here. Just to recap very briefly, earlier this year, we received some complaints about short-term rentals, and I think they kind of brought that up onto the radar for us. And some of the concerns that we had there were related to over parking and maybe some crowded conditions, some safety, some trash accumulation, things like that. And these were all taking place in residentially zoned areas. So we started the process and started to research what our options were in regard to what we might suggest to the council on the next step. So in July, we had a conversation with y'all about short-term rentals. And at that point, after we discussed some options and we talked about zoning and licensing and all these other kind of things, it appeared that y'all kind of wanted to move towards the licensing aspect to kind of focus on that part. And so in response to that, a committee was created, what I've termed the Ordinance Review Committee, for lack of a better word. So if that doesn't sound as good as what y'all maybe have liked, then I'll take responsibility for that. Because the short is ORC. So anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
So
the Orkin graphic up there with
yeah,
the little
exactly,
green
exactly.
thing with the
Yeah, I
club.
knew that's where you were. So you can see we had good rep. Yeah. I'm hoping it'll get better from here. So we had good representation on the committee. Council members O'Banion and Booker were on the committee, and you can see the rest of the members on there. So we had some good talent on there. So we met several times since July. And in our meeting in November, we decided that, we're at this point where we needed to bring it to the full council for conversation. So here we are. So just a quick recap. We looked at lots of different information that we shared with the committee. We consulted the TML. We actually, Sam and I attended an ICMA webinar from Tybee Island, and I put that on there just because this is one of these extreme examples where you have half the number of homes in the community that are STRs. I think 3,000 or 4,000 homes in that community out of 6,000 homes that were in there. Huge impact on the city manager from that community was just kind of spinning in his chair as they were interviewing him at that point. But we learned a lot from it. We learned an awful lot. So we have APA that's helping us out, and the mayor shared with us some information from the National League of Cities. And then we also dug into what's happening around the world and learned that there are a lot of similarities everywhere. So we obviously had to look at some of the local ordinances. So you have a list of those right there. The city of Killeen, I mean, there are a lot of towns in this state that are doing STR ordinances. And I wanted to also speak with Killeen because they're in the process of developing their ordinance, and they're getting close is what I understand. So we'll see how that works out over there. We have their wishes as well. So we're having a good time. So the ordinance that you have in your packet includes 10 major items. It covers everything from the registration and permitting to establishing minimum standards, minimum safety standards, operating requirements, annual inspections and renewal. Under what conditions do we revoke the permit? It addresses existing STRs, requires the payment of hotel motel taxes, which is one of the main goals of the ordinance, to get us to know who and where they are and make sure that they pay their taxes. It provides for an appeal process if they go through the registration or the permitting process and there's some problems with them. And then provides for exemptions. What does the ordinance not cover? And we're thinking hotels, motels, things like that, things that would seem to be similar but not the same, including bed and breakfasts. And we also have a recommended effective date, which we are suggesting to be about 90 days, to be 90 days after the effective date of the ordinance, if the council adopts the ordinance. We are at an interesting point in time as far as this project is concerned, because next month the legislature will convene, and over the last 7 or so years, bills have been submitted to the legislature, and not too many bills. As a matter of fact, I think only one has actually made it to the floor. And actually, I say none right there. But there was one that actually made it, but it didn't ever made it out. It did not make it out of committee. That's what I'm trying to say. So as the legislature convenes and time passes, we just don't know what's going to happen with STRs and regulations. How tight are they going to tie our hands? Are they going to let us do what we think is most appropriate in our local communities? And so, now correct me if I'm wrong, guys, if I say this incorrectly, but our attitude, generally speaking, is let's put something together that'll help us. And if the legislature unravels it, then we'll respond to that. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Kind of recap of what we were talking about.
Yes.
So the work that the committee has done has not been in vain. And we think we have a good ordinance that is consistent with many of the ordinances, avoids many of the pitfalls that we read about in terms of the legal actions that we've read about. Austin, for instance, and New Orleans and other towns. And so, yeah, we think we're on the right path. And like I said, we're ready to discuss this with you if you want to get into the details. We thought that as part of the adoption process, we would schedule a public hearing. We picked January 10th, because we don't know what you think about that, but as a move forward point, we might want to have a conversation about the ordinance with the community, and then we can move on from there. So I'll stop there and try to answer any questions that you might have, and of course, I'm very appreciative of the fact that we can talk about that for this evening.
Quick question on page 10. Item short-term rental permit denial and revocation. Highlighted subset B, and it gives the reasons for revocation. And I think I understand it correctly. There may be a bit of a typo, or it may just be me. It reads, should the owner or operator of a short-term rental property fail to remit hotel occupancy? Is that supposed to be taxes instead of Texas? The permit will be revoked immediately should the owner or operator of a short-term rental property have 3 or more violations within a 12-month period, the city may revoke a permit for one or more of the following reasons. And part of the reason for my observing that this week was the reasons for revocation, which I think, as we discussed in the past, are very obvious and very appropriate, I think. So that's what drew me to that.
Right, yeah, you're right. It should be taxes. And the way that we style this is that if you don't pay your taxes, your permit's revoked immediately or as quickly as we can under the circumstances. And then the second part of that sentence is really related to the one or more violations within that year.
Yes, good.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How do we know if they aren't permitted or they aren't remitting their taxes? Neighbor policing. I mean,
Well,
we
there's,
might have a way to monitor that or oversight of who's permitted and who isn't.
I'm hearing you ask me, how do we know if somebody's paying their hotel occupancy taxes?
Or they haven't remitted their tax.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, and I may have to defer to Mike a little bit on this, that they will pay them to the state and they're paid back to us, or they pay directly to us?
Hotel taxes are paid directly to the city. So really what it would be is somebody operating without a permit. So I think we'll, because if they have a permit, I'm going to keep them on my radar to make sure that we get paid. As far as monitoring somebody, we'll have to take some steps to monitor regularly other sites, things like that.
And just some other general questions, $1,000 permit, and that sets me up for an inspection of my 1950s home in an older neighborhood. And I'm the only one that can have one of those within 500 feet. And so there can't be a row of rentals like we see a lot of times, either in a college town or along a creek or some scenic attraction.
Yes, sir.
That's usually a pretty popular rental in a row of those together. And that I'd also have to have smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, GFCIs, which would be tough for older home. I'm just thinking this through.
Right.
It seems like a lot of requirements. If I wanted to rent out a room and do a little Airbnb during a football game, and have access through a side entry, and they could use my kitchen and a bedroom, which we have used personally as we've gone to Tech or San Marcos or other spots. That's pretty popular, easy, and I just don't remember so much code being involved with something that we rented.
We found that to be pretty standard in what we reviewed from other ordinances. And I feel pretty strongly about those as well.
And we've been to Round Top where we rented a little farmhouse that I know that electricity was an issue. But and I can see that in San Antonio, Galveston, and maybe some of the other, I think Fredericksburg was the smallest that we looked at, but I just have some concerns about that. Number one, spacing, the requirements, the permitting, how we monitor that. And I appreciate all the work you guys put into it. I know it's a lot. And some other ones that we've been to have said, hey, if you have more than 2 cars, here's something to put in your window and you can park at the church parking lot or something. There's our agreement for excessive parking. So I think that was one of the big complaints that we had, parking and trash, and taking over a neighborhood from an Airbnb that nobody really knew even was in existence. So I don't know, not real specific question, but a lot of general issues that I think have to be worked through.
Trying to find the balance of the right amount of regulation, licensing, permitting standard, as opposed to, we can't prohibit them. Certainly can't go as far as land use decision for each one, like an SUP or something like that through zoning. So the licensing regulation seems to be about the right approach on balance, looking at what everybody else is doing. But then it's a matter of how much standards, carbon monoxide, certainly have somebody in there and there's some accident, we've heard about some recent ones like that.
Does the city have any liability with these? Is why all the additional?
Not any more than we would have with hotel or any other type of a rental for hire type operation. So hard to know. I know the committee has worked on it, really, really hard. Stephanie and Daniel. may
Yeah,
have
I
some
know.
comments.
Just to briefly summarize, I think all four of our meetings, every meeting we had a sense of it's not worth doing it, but it's worth doing it. We had a sense of, is it constitutional? Is it not constitutional? There was a sense of how much is too much. And so it was a lot of back and forth, just like you're feeling right now reading it. And a lot of what boiled back to continuing to push it through was these are hotel moteliers now that are taking their home and turning it into a commercial enterprise. And that's exactly what it is. And they're charging more than what hotels do in the long run. When you look at the extra fees, the booking fees they charge, and that really came down to it is when, if or when in Belton, it may not happen this way, but if it does, and we have Airbnbs out running, some of the other cities like we looked at, then at what point are we being fair to our hotel moteliers that are paying they have all the fire safety, et cetera? It's commercial. I mean, and that's kind of what it boiled down to. I mean, it's a lot of back and forth, and there was no right answer at any meeting that we felt. And so John's questions are the same questions we had every meeting, and then on the flip side. And so, it's just how to move forward was the big thing. And we got to a point where we felt like we couldn't do anymore. So that's why I brought it to y'all. So
Also Airbnb and VRBO, some of those folks had some requirements that they're handling some of that anyway. You're gonna be on their list. They're gonna have requirements in place that you have to meet for them to support that, because they'll be held liable. There's an accident or a fire or something like that. We found that the companies themselves had some liability. And so some of those are in place other ways as well.
I think those would be a little more, I envision those as exit map and a fire extinguisher, but
But you'd be
gloves and
surprised.
electrical and
You'd be
that
surprised.
they require.
Yeah. There was different ones. Different VRBO versus Airbnb or versus, there's so many.
So a couple of questions. So first is taxes payable. Who collects and who pays? Is it going through Verbo and Airbnb where they collect the taxes as part of it and then they remit that to us on behalf? Because most of the transaction happens in the app and in whatever country that they're operating their business. Do we know that?
We kind of sort of do.
Okay.
Mike's gonna speak.
Well,
Yes, Bob's gonna answer correctly. I think it depends. I think you can contract with the VRBO or those kind of folks to collect, to remit on your behalf. But I mean, I don't know the exact answer to that question because we don't have, I have a couple who are paying, a couple of different entities. Can't tell you where they are. It's not secret. I just don't know. That are paying us directly, that are doing just this. They are doing the correct thing, and that's remitting hotel occupancy tax.
The thing that I start seeing with this, as I've thought about this a little bit more, we just talked about legislature getting into session, and the last time that Austin tried to do this with everyone can run a taxi operation, right? So Uber and all that stuff. And Austin said, not in our town, because we're concerned about safety and managing the drivers. And it sounds very similar to what we're saying about houses, just with drivers and cars. And so it got to be so onerous. And the people that were having to pay the people that lived in Austin, it didn't really affect them that much. But the legislators that come into Austin that don't live there was exceedingly frustrating because taxes aren't great in Austin, that it basically repealed and there's no control. So basically reverted back to the app to control it. So I think the first thing that we need to do, whatever we do here, is work with the companies that manage these, because it's hard for these as an individual to go rent their place for a day all by themselves with their own website, right? They're not going to do it. They're going to sign up through a national app. So I think we should probably work with them to make sure that we can embed the policing to say, hey, if they're going to be here, they need to whatever, right? So And it's happening now with what Amazon, if something delivers to your address, they collect the sales tax and they pay that. So I think that that's the first thing I would do is I think we need to probably ensure that the hotel motel taxes are remitted through the app instead of trying to go and knock on doors and say, show us your books. You know, and so anyway, so that's comment one. I think comment two is I think I really do like the permitting process, because if there is a problem and there's a lot of complaints, it at least allows us to have the conversation, whether it's legal or not legal or wherever it's not tested yet. At least it allows us to do that. That being said, once, let's say I were to have a property in downtown Belton that's close to the creek and close to UMHB and it's rented a lot. If I'm a frequent flyer and I do well and I collect $10,000 in hotel motel tax in the last year, and I've been a good citizen and I've worked with you guys, I should allow that permit should just roll over and just get permitted again, because we're going to collect money again. And so I think it's one of those kind of price of entry. But if you're a good citizen, then I think that potentially could be waived in, you know, if hotel in lieu of the hotel motel. So anyway, that's just to make it easier for people who have it, not having to go pay all the time. And the last one is the actual inspection. Well, actually, I have two more. One is inspection. I think there's something that feels right and wrong about that all at the same time. So I think we need more input on that. It's like, you know, we have other rental properties, and some of these some of the people that used to live on South Connell Street and had a lot of these lower cost rentals. I won't say what the name of those things are. That we see a lot of domestic disturbances. We see a lot of drug use, and some of these are all they're rentals. We don't inspect those. So would we inspect this and not inspect that? I think that's and I also get it that if you live there a long time, you'll know that you're having a sink problem. But if you're just coming in for the weekend, inspecting and making sure you have a working sink is kind of nice. But that is managed honestly by the app, because if it's a Verbo, they're like, well, this is a 1-star. It doesn't work. So the inspection is kind of taken care of through the rating system. So that's the second. The last comment is if you were to have a high density area, and I'll use a Charleston, South Carolina as an example. There are going to be areas in Charleston, South Carolina that people have really high end, tens of millions of dollar homes. That area, there are no Verbos. Just that it's not going to happen. But there are other areas in Charleston that you're going to have high density of Verbos and Airbnb, because it's reasonable. So I think instead of having this cherry pick every other house, is if there was an area that in this area, we're going to allow for a higher density of rentals, because you could see that potential, I don't know, Pearl Street if it was ever developed on Pearl Street along the creek, across from the park, that may end up being almost like a motel district, that it could be a rental district. And I think that potentially allowing for a rental district would allow for investors to come in and do that. And so I think all of this stuff has got to get tested and go through public comments, but those are just kind of my top.
Right. Just a couple of.
Often you do see someone who has one that's very successful. They buy the one next to it and a couple of those, and then they have 4 rentals right there together that are all managed really well and clean and nice to go to. And something like that along the river, or University District, or something like that downtown.
We just
would be pretty neat.
we
But not on
discussed-
14th Street, right?
We
No, I'm
discussed.
thinking about opening up a room, but I got to pass the inspection.
We're on a business.
I think we have language that said it's exempt if you live there. So if it's just a room, I think you're
I'm going to
good.
get my permit. This is somebody else can be doing around me.
Question, when with the 500-foot between the two, and I notice on the map, there are two areas, I guess, where the properties are closer than 500 feet already. Would they be grandfathered?
Current would be great.
Yeah, they would. I mean, you have to go through, the way the ordinance is set up right now is that you would have to go through the permitting process. And so if they passed inspections and passed all the rules, they don't fall off the you know, they don't get denied a permit, then yeah, they would just stay there the way they are.
Stephanie, you had a comment?
I did, thank you. One of the discussions we had to address John and a little bit of David's is we did discuss that there are probably areas that would be more popular to have additional, and that could be discussed as we do like an overlay where we have, you know, more for UMHB activity maybe, or downtown was a huge part of our discussion. But we needed to put something in place that protected our neighborhoods. And was what we found standard throughout the other ordinances in the state of Texas, was that 500 feet that would protect neighborhoods from being overrun with that, but yet would give us a way to also later address if we had an area in downtown and we wanted to make it a little more dense. We have a opportunity to do that. But we felt more important that we protect the neighborhoods from being like just what John said. We had, I can't tell you the number of communities I talked to at TML that said that and I know we're not Marfa, but they can't sell a home in Marfa right now. And they're all Airbnbs. It's like 80% of their housing market is taken up with Airbnbs. It's very, and you want to say that'll never happen here. I think I've learned not to say it'll never happen here, but it's a protection method that felt or seemed doable for us, for our community. Daniel, would you say that about the 500 feet discussion?
Yeah, a lot of them had a percentage of a block face.
Mhm.
Then it's even extra policing at that point. The 500 foot was, like you said, for the ones on a state drive and things like that, where we're getting the complaints and I think that's where we, if somebody applies for the permit and gets approved, we're going to send a letter out like we would for public comments or public hearing. But this would be more of a notification that say, hey, your neighbor's been approved for a Airbnb. If you notice any problems, let us know, kind of thing. But yeah.
And how does the city police parking in that area?
It would be primarily based on complaints. So where we, if they go through the permitting process, we would say you're limited to so many, parking spots or what have you. We're proposing one spot per bedroom, I think it was. And so if there's a complaint and we see too many cars there, then obviously there's a problem, and that's grounds for, that's one of those strikes against you.
Have we had any more complaints since the 2 or 3 that started this process?
I'm not aware of any.
Wayne?
No.
I've had, not
like you have
recently,
kids
but I promised a couple of the folks who were concerned that we would have a public hearing and they would have a chance to hear our discussion and to contribute to our discussion. And I know that I wasn't privy to the committee's work, but obviously y'all have done a great job looking at all these issues. And the 500 feet, I think, would allay the fears of some of those folks that a state drive or any other area in town is not going to turn into that unless we designate, as Stephanie said, an entertainment or a rental district around the college or down Pearl Street or whatever. So I appreciate that. And also there was if anyone's interested in following up, there's a great article today in Wired Magazine talking about how Airbnbs and VRBOs are really making housing markets, skewing them in certain areas. Now, we're not Sedona, Arizona or Marfa, thank goodness, but it is a concern to me. And to me, the number one concern is public safety. And I'm the one that mentioned the detectors for those kinds of things, just because if we're going to go through the permit process, yes, we're not going to expect somebody to remodel an old house before they put it in Airbnb, but we also want it to be safe, even though that's not our responsibility to police everything they do. At least we can do some things up front if they're willing to put that house on the market as a rental. And I've stayed in Airbnbs all over the place, and some of them have been great and had everything that you could possibly want. Some of them haven't, but like David said, you can go back and look at the reviews. And if it's a 1-star Airbnb, then you're not going to go back there. So, but I appreciate everybody's work on that. I want to hear what the public has to say, and I want to hear that, and I fear what the legislature may say. So,
Me too.
a
lot of money behind it.
There's a lot of money behind it, and it's not necessarily all Texas money, although some of it obviously is. But
it's a strong property rights issue too. you know.
It's a huge property rights issue. If I wanted to turn my house into an Airbnb, I'm sure my neighbors would not like me anymore. And that's exactly what's happened down in the State Drive and with some of the folks that I've talked to that are extremely concerned, you know, they're longtime homeowners. And as far as our policing, like Bob said, if we get a complaint about parking, we'll have something to back it up because we told them when we got the permit, you have 3 spaces or whatever it happens to be. And then we have some a leg to stand on if we try to go out and enforce it. So,
The other thing we found was there's a lot of items in place already. Some with parking, RVs, trash, it would be adhere to existing ordinances that are in place for our community. We found that a lot of different times where we would come across something, Chief Ellis would bring that up quite a bit. We have this ordinance in place already, we just need to enforce it. So there are several things regarding items that we were discussing that were in place already for our community, for our own residents that would cover things that concerned us as well.
Leading up to the public hearing, are we going to contact those people who are current short-term rentals to let them know that there will be a hearing?
We would like to. The challenge is you don't really know where they are specifically until you book a room.
So
And
there lies the biggest problem.
That was the question John asked.
If we can't find them to get them to a meeting, how are we gonna find them to even do this?
Neighborhood
Yeah.
policing.
It's
Exactly.
just like, all I can hear is, what's his face, citizens arrest, right?
well,
So-
but what I'm reminded of, I think, is that if somebody wants to rent something, there's got to be some method of contacting them through an agency or something. So
And this is-
Short-term rental, no.
This is, it's the app you sign, that's where we've got to get into, find community relations at Airbnb and Verbo are the top 2. I don't know if there are any other ones. I think we need to find a way to reach out to them. I don't know, because if we can't get,
If I'm coming to Belton and I hit the top 3 and say, I want to rent a place in Belton. I mean, can't we just look on the apps and say,
Well,
here's what's available?
the addresses, but you don't necessarily. and
It
can
shows
put
you an
addresses.
approximate location. It doesn't give you the address until you.
When you book it, you get the name of the contact and how
And
to access
exact
the
address.
facility on
But
the.
you can communicate with the person doing the booking, because when I.
Oh, previously.
So these locations on the map are not specific?
Not
no, they're
exact.
approximate.
Huh.
Yeah, approximate.
So Bellcat wouldn't help us?
No,
Oh.
no,
Not
So what we're-
If we had an address, Bellcat would help.
no, yeah.
Until the-
You have to, yes, if you had an address, but there's. Okay.
So thinking ahead into the administration of the ordinance, we've.
I've never
Talk
gone
to
to
us.
sign up a property through this. I don't know. What if you rented a house for a year and half the year you rented it out as Airbnb? So it's double rented, right? I'm renting it and turning it into an Airbnb on a rented property that I don't know. I don't know the requirements. It's real fuzzy when it gets into that. And that's what I think we've got to anchor that down.
So what I was about to say is that we've talked to a company that can mine that information as to who and where and what that is, that kind of stuff. Help us with the administration obviously
Sounds-
for a fee.
Obviously for a fee. Yeah, that sounds like
But
a
it's
look for an opportunity and
absolutely. And they're not the only company out there because it's a national thing. So
And put them on the committee.
Any other comments in the work session? Again, appreciate council members, Daniel and Stephanie and the staff for working on this, because I know it's in Matt's term, it's a sticky wicket. Don't think there's an easy way around it.
Gray area, or is the council comfortable in us going ahead and moving toward the public hearing on January 10th? Trying to get as much information out, working with Paul, trying to contact who we can, the folks that have expressed an interest in the past about coming to a public hearing, letting them know. It's a new area for all of us, and a lot of cities are dealing with it. And we're just kind of trying to find our way and figure out what the appropriate level of regulation is.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see who shows up at the public hearing and to hear their concerns. And some of them I know are going to be, they don't want them anywhere and we can't do that. So I know it's not going to be the most pleasant public hearing we've probably had, but I appreciate the work.
So we'll kick off the year with an unpleasant public hearing here. Is that what you're doing?
Hey, Happy New Year.
Well, we've dealt with NIMBY in the past. I guess we can have another
This
NIMBY.
is not our
party.
first rodeo. Is that what you're saying, Dan?
Yeah.
Right. Any other comments before we adjourn into executive session? If not, I'll close the regular session and we will adjourn into regular session, into executive session in 5 minutes in the Smith Room.
Is that where the snacks are? Just kidding.